I'm Josh Olson. I'm, among other things, the host of The Movies That Made Me. I'm also a very good friend of Eric. Oh, thank you. Co-host. And Eric Nelson, the director of this film, is a very, very good friend of mine. Thank you for him. And I'm very, very excited to be here tonight. We've got several guests. We're going to do a Q&A after the film. And we've got several guests, folks who are actually in the film, as well as the gentleman I'd like to introduce you to right now. Erni Massa was a producer on the Mike Douglas Show. He's also a producer on the film. And he's going to say a few words, then we're going to start the movie. But please stick around. We're going to have a Q&A afterwards. It'll be great.
Is this live? It is, okay. Yeah, my name's Erni Massa. I was a college student when I started on the Mike Douglas Show in 1969. This happened in 1972, a few years later. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room actually had something to do with the Mike Douglas Show or worked on the Mike Douglas Show? One, two. There's one of our directors. There's Bob Loudon. There's Shelley Herman. There's John Vesey. Joe Loomer. Wow, good to see you all. So this kind of, the Mike Douglas Show was an unusual show in terms of daytime television in that we had a co-host on the show. And the idea of a co-host was that the co-host would suggest guests that they would like to bring on the show. Co-hosts on the Mike Douglas Show ranged from people like Ralph Nader and Julie Nixon Eisenhower to Barbra Streisand and Cher. But this was a particularly unusual week in that Yoko Ono contacted the show, we believe, and asked if she could do a conceptual art week on the Mike Douglas Show. And her theory was that if she got something to do on each one of the shows, she could influence culture. And her message was peace and love. And it was really kind of interesting because John had recently left the Beatles just a year or two before and was never political at all when he was a Beatle. And this kind of freed him up to have the opportunity to talk about politics, talk about things he never talked about before. So Eric Nelson, this brilliant director who did this, approached us about 35 years ago when I was running King World. I was able to capture the Mike Douglas library, 5,000 shows, which were on 2-inch videotape, and preserve them. And we were able to take this particular week, enhance it with AI. Actually, it looks better in the movie than it did when we did it, which is hard to believe. It's also in stereo now, and we didn't have stereo back in the day. So I hope you enjoy it. And with a message of peace and love, let's hope that whether we're red or blue, we can all at least listen to each other and hear the ideas that each other has to express. And this is Eric Nelson's Daytime Revolution.
Let me start with you two, because you were approached by Yoko and John directly. Say 6 months earlier, because it was such an interesting time, and folks who are kind of, in the culture the way you were not likely to appear on a show like the. What could you have anticipated that ever happening? First of all,
like I said, Yoko who? Yoko who? No, it was totally, we were out in different spheres of existence. They were a mass, famous, couple. And Chris and I and the rest of us were, in communities, doing our job, singing rallies and temples and universities, trying to get students to wake up. And so it was a different stratospheres. I don't know how she found out who I was.
That was going to ask too. You had no relationship at all. It wasn't just.
I only knew she had a cousin named Shinya Ono who was really a cousin of hers. And that's maybe how she heard of us. Otherwise, I have no idea.
That's wild.
I was sitting in my studio, actually sitting at my piano in my studio, which was in Stony Point, New York, up the Hudson. A wonderful kind of artist colony up there. My next door neighbor was David Tudor. And I was just working on something and the phone rang. Now, it was such a shock that it's a little bit vague exactly like whose voice was on the other side of the phone, but it was either John or someone said, John Lennon wants to talk to you, or something like that. And I just said, great, how you doing? And because I didn't know what else to say.
Sure, yeah.
Right? And the conversation started, and it became clear that it was authentic. He already knew something about my work. I believe that it was either John Cage or a ethnomusicologist named Fred Lieberman, who was in that community, who was at that time at Brown University. One of them, because John Cage just lived down the street from them, was very close. And of course, Yoko and John knew each other from the Fluxus community and all of that. So I think that's how they got directed to me. And so the result of the conversation was they invited me down to their house. And I went down and we spent some time on an afternoon talking and had a wonderful time, really great time. Just really vigorous conversation about ideas, all kinds of ideas. And then we just arranged to do this thing, and we did it. That's how it started.
Ernie, you were at what stage of pre-production would this have been? Were they were obviously already confirmed with the show. Had they come in with a list of potential guests and then?
First of all, I want to
Yeah.
say this has just been so much fun. Can we do this again in 50 years?
Absolutely.
Please.
The guests were recommended through John, through Yoko. Yoko called the show quite a bit. She was on the phone with us quite a bit. And we contacted the guests and asked them to be on the show, told them what we expected, what we could do. In your case, David, we had to figure out the technological part of it.
Yeah, it was complicated.
And one of our directors, Bob Loudon, is here in the audience tonight. And I remember it was complicated in trying to make sure it was going to work.
Right.
I remember a show where we tried to bring on a person that was able to express auras. And we couldn't figure out how to turn out the studio lights to see an aura.
Yeah.
Because the show just was dark, there were no auras. And in your case, I remember the specific phone call from Yoko. And she specifically wanted you to sing the song, the protest song, what she called a protest song. And it was kind of funny because I was in the studio when you had your little fit with the director. And you were right. And you stood up for yourself, and I'm so proud of you for doing it, and I'm so glad we did it.
Well, it took me years to understand that I wasn't really speaking just for me or Chris because we had this song. That I was speaking out because for the 100 years, a century, Asian Americans had been in this country. They have repressed our voices. And so I was really speaking out for my people. And that's what made it easy to do, because it wasn't just about me.
And you did it beautifully. You really did.
Yeah. I mean, that had to be, and also you had to be sort of thinking consciously or unconsciously, this could be the only chance I get to do something on this scale.
Really, we didn't care.
But I'm saying, there's all this kind of, this is the moment. Don't you think?
Not really.
Where this is why you have to make the statement? No.
I mean, I was wary about going on the show because I felt like we could be manipulated.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it. We didn't want to be manipulated.
Right.
But we were really about finding our own voice and reaching our own people. We weren't really interested in reaching beyond that because we had enough to do right there.
Right.
And also, I wanted to say another thing is people might look and say, oh, Yoko's Japanese, Nobuko's Japanese. But we're worlds apart. I'm a third generation, born in America, mixed blood Japanese American. And Yoko came from Japan, from, a very good family. Yeah. She was an artist in her own right there. It's very different worlds. So I don't know if you noticed or thought that. Oh, these are two Asian women on this show. I don't know if you.
Well, I think it's an easy mistake to make, Josh. One of the most difficult things as producers, and I was, a very young producer at the time. I hadn't become producer of the show yet. Was mixing in the other guests that had already been booked, like Louis Nye. Now you see in a couple of shots there, Louis Nye, and if you don't, If you don't remember Louis Nye, he started with Steve Allen. He was a famous man on the street artist. So he said, what in the world do I do with Yoko Ono and John Lennon? I don't relate. I don't have any. So Yoko said, we're going to get phone books from all around the country. And I'm going to open the phone book, and I'm going to point to a phone number. This is for younger people. We used to not have cell phones. And the only way you could find somebody, there was no internet, was to find a phone book and look up the name and number and call them. So we had Louis make what she called love calls. And the idea was he was just to call a complete stranger and say, this is Louis Nye, and I want you to know I love you. Well, this went pretty well up until Yoko had the idea that we should call Mayor Frank Rizzo.
Oh, wow. From
Now,
my
if you're from
hometown.
Philadelphia or if you're not from Philadelphia, Frank Rizzo was just to the right of Attila the Hun.
But
kind of,
his own words.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very tough chief of police in Philadelphia. We loved him because he would close Walnut Street for us. Bob will tell us stories about that and let us drive the moon rover down Walnut Street or whatever we were doing. But Louis only got as far as the secretary. So he told the secretary how much he loved her because Frank never picked up the phone.
That's amazing. I grew up a block away from Move, so I did not love Frank Rizzo. But I want to ask you, Nobuko, what was what was the impact? I mean, obviously there was an impact. What was the impact of doing the show? How did it change anything for you? Did it change anything for you? I'm going to ask you the same question in a minute.
Actually, not really. I mean, a lot of people who knew us and we sang for in our circles and our communities saw the show and they were shocked. They were amazed. Oh my God, you were on, national television. I mean, it was a sort of big deal on that level, but it didn't catapult us anywhere. And but it's now that it's interesting.
Did you stay in touch with Yoko?
No,
Really?
no. I never really had a conversation with her at all. Even in the
Not
limousine.
Not even in the limousine?
No.
Huh.
Interesting.
How about John?
Not much.
Jerry Rubin?
No.
Me?
Mike?
I just met you tonight again.
That's true. That's true.
No, I felt very isolated actually after I had that explosion. They were afraid to speak to me, I think. So we sat in the back of the limousine and we just went, well, okay. I think we embarrassed them pretty good. So.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's an amazing performance. David, I guess same question. Sort of, what was the impact of the show on your life? Kind of.
Again, not really very much. I mean, we're artists. We do what we do. We are who we are, and we keep going and do what we do. Of course, it sort of disappeared for quite a while until I think it was Rhino Video brought it out on VHS cassette.
1998, yeah.
Yeah. When was it?
98.
98.
Let me interrupt one second. I can't even remember. I mean, I was a child of the show was on and daytime stuff, but sorry. But you didn't do reruns, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we
So
did.
there people would have had a chance to see it again, maybe
this,
once.
this week did not rerun. But there were certain things that reran. And
This week did not rerun?
No, it did not rerun.
Was there a reason for that?
But the Rhino, the music rights and the expenses and things like that would screw up certain kinds of reruns.
Right.
We actually originally did 52 weeks a year, 90 minutes live. Wow. So picture doing 7.5 hours of television in a 40-hour work week. So take out the 7.5 hours, that leaves you about 30 hours to prepare.
Right.
Doesn't work. So that's why we started doing 6 shows. That's why these 5 shows were recorded on a Thursday night. Because by doing 6 shows, we were able to have an extra week. And then every 6 or 7 grouping of these shows, we could take a week off. We could actually go spend Christmas with our families and do some other things. And
So this really there wasn't even one, just to get across to some people in the audience who may not get this aired and that was it. All you had was people who saw it talking about it.
MTV and VH1.
Well, that's decades later.
Yeah.
But for the time.
Right.
So it didn't.
No, we just kept doing what we do, and
Did people call
life
you?
went on.
Did people call you and want to hire you to do what you did after seeing the show?
No. No, but I kept, I continued to work on the whole area of music and neuroscience, and along with my own musical work for years, and have, put out a lot of publications and things and recordings.
Did
of
you
that
make an
work,
album?
but yes, several. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one I issued in a record called Brainwave Music in '75, which has been reissued just a few years ago. And along with other, it's not the only kind of music I make, obviously, but and I published a book called Biofeedback in the Arts.
Did you
right
try to
around
get
the
back on
same
the Mike
time.
Douglas show with the album?
No, I didn't. But that work has had a long shelf life. It's now there's a lot of interest that has come back in that work. So things are getting reissued, and I'm very gratified about that. But it was a line of work that I had already started doing, and they found out about it and asked me to come in. I had actually been on the Mike Douglas show the preceding year, as I mentioned to you earlier. It just came from publicity around that work, and then this invitation put it in a different context. Though it gave it an artistic and a sociocultural framing that could not have happened any other way that I can think of. So that made it extremely special and very meaningful. Whatever we could actually demonstrate in that electrically noisy studio environment to try to do that. But we feel like we got some good results. So
I mean, I was making a joke earlier, but was there a reason you didn't plug Chuck Berry in? Because I feel like
I only had 2 monitors. I only had 2 channels
Chuck Berry.
available. I only had 2 brainwave amplifiers. And there was a segment of the show just before putting it on John and Yoko that I put it on Mike.
Yeah,
And it was a very brief little demo. And then the real part came.
Did you meet any of
there.
the Mike Douglas band? Did you meet any of those 8 musicians that were working on the show?
I maybe briefly, but not in a substantial way. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
What was the viewership that week, and did you receive feedback from those viewers?
It was the highest rated week of the year. The show quite often did 6, 7, 8 million people watching the show on a daily basis. There were only 3 stations. You had ABC, NBC, and CBS. This was the very early days of syndication, meaning that the show went out to 200 stations in a bicycle format. So there was no internet, there was no transmission, there was no satellites. So to have a show air, you had to make a copy of the tape. And we made 30 or 40 copies of every show. And then the show was what was called bicycled. And literally, some of them were delivered on bicycles. Some were delivered by UPS. Some were hand-carried to Greyhound buses. And the show aired in time zones. So the first time zone on the East Coast aired, then the Central time zone, then the Pacific, then the Midwest time zone, and then the Pacific time zone. So if you did the Mike Douglas show, and it was airing on February 1st, and you traveled across the country, you might see it 4 times as you went to different cities. Yeah.
So the viewership went up that week.
Yeah, it was, and the mail, it was snail mail, of course.
Yeah.
People wrote us. It was all very positive. The only negatives we got, stations didn't complain, the FCC didn't complain, because we really, if you look at it in the standards of what we were doing, it wasn't all that crazy and wild, it was pretty tame. But Westinghouse executives got very upset. And Westinghouse Electric kind of came down on us a bit. I remember years later I got called to Pittsburgh to where the headquarters was, and we were building a new studio, and we wanted to build more dressing rooms because in that little studio we didn't have any dressing rooms, believe it or not. We had 1 dressing room where all those guests had to share and use the dressing room. And the big executive at Westinghouse looked at me and he said, "Ernie, you're a nice young man, but if these people were professional, they would come dressed."
Nobuko, I want to ask you, are you, just to kind of follow up, are you, you're still active, singing music, dance?
Yes.
And the special is it's brand new, right? The PBS.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So November 1st, two very talented filmmakers made this documentary and reduced my 84 years into 54 minutes. And their work is called Nobuko Miyamoto, A Song in Movement. Will be on Artbound, the PBS. You know what that is? Artbound starting on November 1st, and among some 5 other documentaries about the arts.
Oh, great. Well, I apologize. I said it was out now. I apologize. But
Yeah.
that's what's coming up then.
Yeah.
And also, before I get to my last question, before we throw it out, Eric asked me to mention the movie is just showing today all around the country, but it is coming to streamers soon, definitely home video. There's going to be 3 songs that aren't in this, and that's going to be landing hopefully in late November. I want to ask each of you the same question. I don't know, why don't we just start down there with you, Ernie? But how would you put what they were trying to achieve into words? And do you think, and I'm talking about John and Yoko, do you think they achieved it?
Yeah, I think Yoko was creating a cultural experiment. What she wanted to do was show that peace and love was not a horrible concept, and the ability to listen to ideas and be said. You know, one of the most amazing things to me the other night was when the vice presidential debate took place, and people got upset because they were so nice to each other. People were literally not happy with that debate because nobody yelled, nobody called somebody a name, nobody got upset. I think Yoko and Ralph Nader, who I talk to all the time, and Ralph is still quite active. Ralph was very involved in the artificial intelligence part of the recent SAG-AFTRA strike, because he's scared to death that we're going to take the humanity out of the humanities. And so I think she accomplished what she was trying to bring John into. I think John was feeling his way. I don't think John was, not that he wasn't involved or didn't believe, but you hear him say several times along the way, well, this is what she's saying, this is what she wants, this is what she's doing. So it's not quite 100% that he's quite figured it out yet, but he's starting to believe.
Same question.
Well, I think Yoko did frame the week, and I hadn't seen all the week, so it was the first time I saw a lot of the stuff, and I said she had some very interesting ideas, and she was able to actually apply them on television with unsuspecting, audiences, but the other thing I thought was it gave Middle America access to some people they would never be able to just hear Bobby Seale talking about all these things, or John Lennon actually talking about what he loved, and you could really feel his feelings about music. It was very real.
Jerry Rubin talking about his parents.
Jerry Rubin talking, and also John had a very tough life. Yeah. But the ideas that they were fomenting and planting and that. I mean, the big thing when they were trying to stop us from singing the song was that the housewives of the Midwest were going to react. That's why I asked you, did you get mail about it? So it was giving people access to things that they would never ordinarily see or hear, music that they wouldn't ordinarily hear, in one framework. I thought it was pretty interesting myself.
Yeah, no, I agree. And David, same question.
Well, it was really phenomenal, actually, because it was a whole week filled with nuggets of cognitive openness or expanded awareness in some ways. So in so many different ways. We can use terms like conceptual art, but really it's about, let's turn this thing upside down. Oh my gosh, this is another way to think about it. And to have that many such powerful moments in 5 days of television in the middle of the day, and at that time, was really something. And one thing that I really feel very gratified about is that it helps us remember We can never let go of optimism, no matter how bad things are. And hanging on to optimism is absolutely essential for us to be able to go forward. And I think I can take the feeling of those shows away and say, yes, that's essential, and it's worth doing. It's worth being that way.
The other thing, you spent a good lot of time talking about the election in this piece. And here we are facing an election, and it really talked about why people need to participate and about democracy. And those were things we were talking about in those days, and it's still relevant, and more so even today.
Well, thank you for talking to me. If it's okay with you, I'd like to see if there's a couple of questions coming from the audience. We have a few minutes. Does anyone have anything like to? Yes, you, sir.
Ernie, you had put out a call, I believe it was for that piece of communal artwork. I'm wondering, was that auctioned off after the show? And
We're trying to find it. We don't know what happened.
Do you know where the teacup is?
No, the teacup and the piece of art have totally disappeared. It's interesting when I put that note out, because I'm starting a national scavenger hunt to try to find it. Because if we could find it, wouldn't that be wonderful 52 years later to turn it up? But no, we have no idea where it is or what happened to it. It's funny, the people in the entertainment community all said, check out the prop man's garage.
The gentleman with a funny hat back there.
Was Yoko approached to be a part of the documentary? Has she seen the documentary? Is she supportive of the documentary?
Yes.
Please hold. Oh, do you know have you spoken to?
Eric worked with Yoko and with Sean. They saw transcripts. They saw certain cuts of the film. And Eric did a movie called The U.S. versus John Lennon a couple of years ago and built a relationship with Yoko. And Yoko was very involved in seeing the parts of the film that she wanted to have included, and even picking the song that she wanted in.
I've got an email here from Eric just a couple hours ago saying, fun fact, Yoko asked to see the film Parens again on Sunday due to all the great press it's getting. And yes, she did consult on it, only asking that we show, do you know this? Only asking that we show more Nobuko and other interviews on camera.
Yeah, she also requested more Ralph Nader.
And what she sees yes, at other interviews. So yes is the answer. We have time for about one or two more here. Young lady.
What's next for the film?
Well, it's going to be on Blu-ray and DVD. Believe it or not,
Yes.
no, it'll stream eventually. But the Beatles fans, the John and Yoko fans, want to have something in their possession. So they don't really want to just buy something that's only on the internet. They want something that they can literally hold and have. So there'll be a Blu-ray released in November around Christmas, and then streaming will come later.
How about for Academy consideration?
Well, that's why it's in theaters. And I've talked to Eric a little bit. I think the restoration guys deserve a technical Oscar, because I was there. Bob was there in that control room. Bob was the director of the Mike Douglas Show and associate director, not of these particular episodes, but this looks better than it looked then.
Oh, well.
Amazing.
Yeah, back then.
I saw a question from Joey Herrick over here. Joey?
Can you share the Yoko hair story? Because I was trying to tell it to everybody here.
Well, yeah. We didn't put it in the film because we didn't want to insult Yoko. But Yoko, one night, wanted to change the rundown of the show. She wasn't happy with the order of the guests and the way the guests were going to be appearing on the show. So John came to the producer, Mike Krause, and he said, Yoko is going to be very upset. And Mike said, well, I don't care if she's upset. This is our show, and we're going to do it in our order. And he said, I think she might wash her hair. And the producer looked at John and said, well, what do I care if she washes her hair? Well, what we didn't know was she did wash her hair, and she made us wait 3 hours for the hair to dry. So it was her kind of silent way of letting us know that we screwed up.
That is unfortunately all the time we have got tonight, folks. But thank you for coming. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's just a delight talking to you.